Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Cindy Drucare. Full honors ceremony was held in Washington today, marking the start of Mark Esper's service as the new Secretary of Defense. President Trump and Vice President Pence were both there alongside the troops.
We're gathered here today to celebrate the swearing in of America's new Secretary of Defense, Mark T. Esper. Secretary Esper, your lifetime of noble service has prepared you for this immense responsibility, and that's what it is, immense responsibility. On behalf of our entire country, thank you and congratulations. Congratulations.
The ceremony, along with Esper's remarks, paid homage to the Pentagon and offered a reminder of the importance of the building to the nation's legacy.
This historic building is not only the headquarters of our armed forces, it is a prominent symbol of America's military power and of our willingness to defend our people and our interests around the world.
Not long after, Esper arrived at the Pentagon to begin his first day on the job. While speaking to reporters, he said the troops and their families are his top priority. He also expressed his appreciation for Trump's confidence in him and the Senate's bipartisan support, saying he's anxious to get to work.
And the House voted today 284 to 149 to approve a 2-year budget deal that would suspend the federal debt limit. President Trump supported it, but more than 2/3 of Republicans voted against it. NTD's Holly Kellum has more on what led up to the vote.
The House took action on a bipartisan budget deal today, which was negotiated by the White House and leaders of both parties in Congress earlier this week. This after President Trump urged Congress on Tuesday to pass it ASAP, calling it a victory for the military and veterans.
Warfighters the tools they need to fight and win with overwhelming force. After years and years of budget cuts and all of the things that they've been doing to set us back with our military, we have more than made up for all of it.
The 2-year budget deal raises overall spending by $320 billion above current budget caps. It also raises the debt ceiling, allowing the government to borrow more so it can pay its bills.
It isn't everything we hoped for, but it got through the debt ceiling. That's so important. We're not going to default on American securities.
U.S. national debt is currently at $22 trillion. By one estimate, the deal could add an estimated $1.7 trillion to it over the next decade. Fiscal conservatives are not happy with the deal, including some of President Trump's most ardent supporters in Congress. The vice chairman of the House Republican Conference tweeted this shortly after Trump announced the deal.
The president makes hard decisions. This was a hard decision. He thought it served the country well in this moment to bless this deal. But the concerns that they're raising about the cost of the deal and the impact to the fiscal picture are not invalid.
Trump has reportedly told aides to look for ways to cut spending if he wins a second term. In the meantime, he's urging Congress to pass the deal that's been negotiated. After passage in the House, the bill will need to be passed by the Senate before it gets to Trump's desk. Holly Kellum, NTD News.
The death penalty is rare in the federal system, and they've been entirely on hold since 2014. But today, the Justice Department announced that capital punishment will resume this December. NTD's Miguel Morano has more.
The Justice Department made its announcement today, and with it listed 5 inmates that will be executed as early as December. All 5 are convicted of murder, and some for raping and torturing children and the elderly. Attorney General William Barr's order to resume capital punishment comes at the end of an Obama-era investigation into the death sentence, an investigation prompted by a botched state execution. A professor from Mississippi School of Law said that Barr is basically saying the department will now start doing its job.
Our lawmakers have put the death penalty in place in the federal government and in many states, and we've had an executive branch that essentially has not been carrying out the law. And by failing to do that, they've not been carrying out the will of the people.
The botched execution of Clayton Lockett consisted of a 3-drug lethal injection that failed to kill him as planned. He eventually died of a heart attack. Part of Barr's order includes replacing the 3-drug procedure with a single drug that has been upheld by the Supreme Court. The death penalty, however, is not upheld in every state. 29 of them use the death penalty, and it has been struck down and reaffirmed by the Supreme Court.
I think the argument against it is the morality argument, the argument that I'm a member of a society, I do not want my society killing on my behalf.
Barr said in the announcement that the government owes it to the victims and their families to carry out its sentences. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
Former special counsel Robert Mueller's testimony in front of 2 House committees yesterday left many questions unanswered as investigations continue, and Mueller was obliged to keep his responses to information confined within the boundaries of his redacted report. Our reporter sat down with Sebastian Gorkin, host of America First, to find out his reactions to the proceedings.
The testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief. So help you God.
Mueller's hearings bounced back and forth between Democrats and Republicans, with Democrats trying to frame old information from the report as obstruction, and Republicans trying to pry new information from Mueller's tight-lipped testimony on the origins of the investigation.
His lies were plain for everybody to see. We don't do this in America. We don't use law enforcement and intelligence for political purposes against our political rivals, and that's what the Mueller investigation was.
Senator Lindsey Graham said today that Mueller served his country well and hoped it would not define his career.
I think it would be good for the country if we could move on from the Mueller report, let that be the final word, and see if we can work on securing our elections against interference in 2020. And I'm going to look at how the whole investigation started, why it went so long.
Mueller at times seemed unfamiliar with some details of the report.
I felt that there were points where he referred back to the report because he was not essentially competent to answer.
I read the polls that very few Americans say they've read the Mueller report. I'd like to know if that number includes Bob Mueller himself.
Gorka felt strongly that Mueller's top prosecutor, Andrew Weissman, was the one that wrote the report.
They were asking him simple questions regarding Fusion GPS, the progenitor of the opposition research dossier that was used to obtain illegal FISA warrants against the Trump campaign. And he doesn't know. And constantly he's saying, oh, could you tell me what page that's on? It was a travesty, and it's clear the person who learned the most about the Mueller report yesterday was Robert Mueller.
Republicans are questioning to what extent the Obama administration was involved in spying on the Trump campaign during the 2016 election.
We have the stroke and page text, which says Obama wants to know everything, the White House wants briefings, so it's absolutely, it is in the realm of fantasy that President Obama did not know about the illegal espionage on the Republican Party and Donald Trump.
House Democrats have vowed to keep investigating the president in the aftermath of Mueller's testimony, the results of which remain the same: no obstruction, no collusion. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
U.S. senators working for a just society and rule of law for the people of China speak out at what they're calling a sad anniversary.
It's 20 years now since the Chinese Communist Party began persecuting the peaceful spiritual practice of Falun Gong. The U.S. Congressional Executive Commission on China, which monitors human rights and the development of rule of law in China, issued a statement saying, for the past 20 years, Falun Gong practitioners have experienced appalling and unacceptable human rights abuses in China. Banned by the Chinese government in July 1999, many Falun Gong practitioners have been subjected to arbitrary detention, torture, forced labor, and constant harassment.
We have a long pattern now of abuses by the Chinese Communist Party and the government that it controls. And as we reach the 20th anniversary, some of the things that have been going on, there's just a reminder of the nature of this government and their ideology and how they've pursued it against multiple groups, frankly.
The statement says the Chinese government should end the persecution of Falun Gong and allow an independent and transparent UN investigation into the human rights abuses suffered by Falun Gong over the past 2 decades.
I think that the more light we can shed on all of these groups that are being persecuted internationally, the more progress we can hopefully make, and at a minimum embarrassing the Chinese Communist Party to being less aggressive against those who are different than them or those who disagree with them. And but we at least owe it to the people who are suffering to continue to voice our concerns and objections to this.
On invitation from the State Department, Falun Gong practitioners recently submitted a list of names of perpetrators of human rights abuses. State Department officials said they will review the list and act in accordance with U.S. law.
One of the tools the United States has used in order to promote human rights and to oppose those who abuse human rights globally is to limit access to the United States through visa control or visa waiver programs. I would like to see our State Department continue to prioritize and focus on universal values and human rights, and in particular, to elevate opportunities around the world for us to work in partnership with our allies, to shine a light on places where people are being mistreated.
Senator Tom Tillis said they have co-signed a bill introduced by Senator Marco Rubio asking the State Department to collect the information needed to limit the export of U.S. high-tech products that may be used by the Chinese Communist Party in human rights abuses.
In any case where the United States can limit or halt any sort of activities or the use of U.S. technologies or any sort of interest that we have control over, that we stop it, make it more difficult for China to do what we think is an unacceptable action.
Reporting by Kitty Wong, NTD News.
Southwest Airlines announced it's pulling out of New Jersey's Newark airport. The carrier's already canceled dozens of flights a day, and it's all due to the grounding of Boeing 737 MAX.
Southwest will cease operations at Newark Liberty International Airport on November 3rd and will also consolidate flights at New York's LaGuardia Airport. Southwest Chairman and CEO Gary Kelly explained that closing Newark has been forced by the MAX groundings.
With the prolonged grounding of the MAX, there's a lot of uncertainty about when these planes are going to come back, and that's forced airlines to scramble because obviously they don't have the planes, they can't fly the flights they expected them to be on.
The 737 MAX planes were grounded in March after 2 deadly crashes. Southwest is among the most affected. In March, it had the most MAX jets of any airline.
Southwest only operated up to 20 flights a day from Newark, so that's a relative drop in the bucket, both for Newark and for the New York City area at all 3 airports. So it's not a good impact for flyers, but it's minimal.
The airline's financial performance at Newark was also trumped by that at LaGuardia, making it a prime candidate for consolidation. Meanwhile, Boeing says it is still working to fix flight control software that appeared to play a role in its 2 major crashes.
After nearly 2 weeks of mass protests, Puerto Rico's Governor Ricardo Rossello says he's stepping down.
Crowds in the streets celebrating as the embattled governor announces his resignation over the chat scandal.
Today I feel that to continue in this position represents a difficulty for the success of the country. I made the decision after listening to demands, speaking to my family, thinking about my children, and praying.
Rosell will stay in his post until August 2nd, after which Secretary of Justice Wanda Vasquez will take over. The 40-year-old is the first governor to resign in the modern history of Puerto Rico. Citizens in this U.S. territory protested for 12 days to demand his resignation. Monday saw the biggest demonstration with 500,000 people flooding the street. Years of messages between the governor and his top aides were leaked to the public, including chats mocking citizens of Puerto Rico who were displaced in the 2017 hurricane, as well as sexist and homophobic comments. During his time in office, Rosell has also been criticized for how he handled the devastating hurricanes in 2017, back-to-back disasters which killed some 3,000 people.
Britain announced today that all British-flagged vessels will now be escorted by the Royal British Navy for protection while traveling through the Strait of Hormuz, a critical artery for oil shipments. The decision comes as a policy reversal on Boris Johnson's second day as Prime Minister. Previously, the government said it didn't have sufficient resources to provide escort. A British frigate, the HMS Montrose, carried out the first mission last night, escorting 2 vessels. The decision to use the Royal Navy was made after 2 British oil tankers were seized by Iranian commandos on July 19th. One was released, but the other is still in Iranian hands. 2 weeks earlier, British forces seized an Iranian tanker near Gibraltar, accusing it of smuggling oil to Syria in breach of European Union sanctions. That tanker is still in custody. U.S. rapper A$AP Rock charged with assault in Sweden today. The crime carries a maximum 2-year sentence. Rocky says he's innocent.
ASAP Rocky has been charged with assault in Sweden over his alleged involvement in a street brawl and is to remain in custody pending trial, the Swedish prosecutor's office said today. The 30-year-old from Harlem has been detained since July 3rd, along with 2 members of his entourage in connection with a fight in central Stockholm on June 30th. He faces a maximum of 2 years in prison if convicted, but the prosecutor said he'll seek less.
I cannot say anything about which sentence I'm going to demand now, but it's not so much as 2 years.
The rapper was in Stockholm to perform at a festival, but his detention has forced the cancellation of the rest of his European tour. His next performance is scheduled for August 11th in the United States.
He feels that he acted in self-defense, and I'm of course sorry that, he needs to suffer through all of this.
The trial will begin on Tuesday.
In our digital world, it's not uncommon to see young children on devices, despite new research that says increased screen time can impact the brain's development. NTD's Shiwen Rong spoke with the Toy Insider senior editor about how to keep your kids off the screen.
As hard as it may be to keep your kids entertained without phones, tablets, or video games, on summer break, the challenge grows bigger.
So things like activity sets or building kits where they build something and then they have, a physical product they can get proud of, because they just made it themselves. So toys like that are really going to help kids, get off the screens.
Mihalik says classic play is trending today.
So we are seeing, parents encouraging their kids to get off the screens a little bit more and have that more classic play. Flower pot as if it's actually growing.
This year's toys are taking it to the next level.
And that's what we call the big reveal. So it's opening up their collectibles in a whole new way. Kids don't know what they're going to get, and that's pretty much the whole excitement of it. And then inside, you have your Bloom doll.
Today's Sweet Suit event showcased this year's most popular playthings, entertaining the kids without a screen.
Bears at Glacier National Park in Montana are enjoying the scenery. Well, at least this one especially. Well, this seems pretty cute, and the bear is definitely loving it. Park officials posted the video to Facebook Wednesday to warn people not to cross the snowfields, even in the summer, especially if you don't have the proper gear. The post said crossing the snow and ice can lead to serious injury and even death. Park officials reported that no bears were injured during the filming of this video, and in fact, this bear galloped away at the end of his slide. And that's all for tonight's NTD News. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Cindy Drucare.